Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV with Bob Weeks.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and politics. We're broadcast on KGPT Channel 26 and its companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me from my blog, The Voice for Liberty, at wichitaliberty.org, where you'll find the motto there is individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in Wichita and Kansas. So I mostly cover Wichita, Sedgwick County, and Kansas, although with some of the national news taking place, it's hard sometimes to keep your focus on the local events. But I try to cover things that may not be covered by the Wichita Eagle or other television stations or radio. Or if we do cover the same news, I'll do it from the perspective of economic freedom, limited government, and individual liberty, as these are the things that are important, and these are the things that are so often under attack by our governments, be it federal, state, or local. So please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter I send 2 or 3 times a week, and if you want to contact me, you can find my email address and phone number there, or it's pretty easy to remember, bob.weeks@gmail.com. At one time, it was thought that the Wichita City-owned parking structure in the 400 block of East William Street, that's the garage where state employees park, it was thought that that would house retail shops along William Street. But the results should give us reason to be wary of government economic development efforts. Here's what the Wichita Eagle reported almost 20 years ago. It said, the council also approved a plan to spend about $76 a square foot to construct roughly 6,000 square feet of retail space on the first floor of the parking garage. The space would lease for an estimated $8.70 per square foot. Councilmember Sheldon Kamen questioned that part of the plan. I just can't visualize spending $76 per square foot, he said. If I was a developer, I would not spend $76 a square foot for retail space on William Street. Councilmember Joan Cole disagreed with Kamen, calling $8.70 a very good price that would attract tenants. It is my feeling there are many small operations that would find this kind of small retail space very attractive, she said. Well, adjusting for inflation, these prices would be $120 per square foot to build and $14 for rent. But you can see that this building has a controversial start. So you may be wondering, what's the state of this building today? Well, one Sunday morning earlier this month, I took a look around, and here's what I saw. Where's the retail business? As we saw in the video, a Wichita City government office occupied some of the space, but that office has moved out to another location. And it's not as though this building has not had advantages. There are hundreds of state employees parking in the garage each workday. It's adjacent to the block with the Eden Hotel and the Wichita Downtown Development Corporation, That's the agency charged with promoting downtown development. This retail space is also right across the street from the city's bus transit center, and also 1 block away from the Intrust Bank Arena, which was promoted as a driver of commerce and activity for the surrounding area. And as you saw, a walk down this block also reveals maintenance issues that might, in some circumstances, be considered as contributing to blight. And maybe that's why there's evidently no demand to rent this space, well, except by a government office, and even it has left. So what is the difference between private ownership of assets and government ownership? Well, a big factor is the accountability provided by markets, along with the profit motive. Private owners of rental property like this have a huge incentive to keep it filled with tenants. If the private owners are able to attract tenants and control their costs, they can earn a profit. And markets impose a discipline on these costs because landlords can charge only what the market will bear for rent. If landlords can't attract tenants or can't control their costs, they go out of business. And that makes the property available to someone else, perhaps someone who can manage the property successfully. We have to remember that free markets, that is, markets in the profit motive, are not perfect, but when private landlords are inefficient, no one is harmed except the landlords themselves. And a related problem is that government can't earn a profit or suffer a loss. As a matter of fact, it can't even calculate profit and loss in any meaningful sense. One reason is that usually government doesn't account for its capital investment. That's certainly the case with this empty retail space. A private landlord would realize that this empty space that can't be rented has an opportunity cost that is very real. That doesn't appear to be the case with Wichita City management. Another example of government ignoring the reality of economics is when Sedgwick County reports the profit for the Intrust Bank Arena, that arena being owned by government, of course. The reported figures don't include depreciation, which is to say the county asks us to simply ignore the capital investment made by taxpayers to build the arena. And this illustrates the weak accountability that government faces. Despite situations like this and other mismanagement, the Wichita City manager received effusive praise from the Wichita City Council earlier this year, along with a large raise in pay. And 2 years ago, the incumbent Wichita mayor didn't even inspire a strong opponent, and only about 12% of the people bothered to vote. And I haven't seen the plight of this parking garage's retail space reported in any traditional news media. These outlets do, however, uncritically trumpet the fictional profits of the downtown arena. No one is being held accountable. We're not even using this as a teachable moment. Consider all the advantages this government retail property has had, but it's still failing. It has no tenants, and it's becoming blighted. The best thing the city could do is sell this property so that the benefits of markets and the profit and loss system can replace city bureaucrats. We'll be back in just a moment. Do you remember 2 years ago when President Obama said this in a television interview? He said, "There are some structural issues with our economy where a lot of businesses have learned to become much more efficient with a lot fewer workers. You see it when you go to a bank and use an ATM instead of going to a bank teller. Or you go to the airport and you're using a kiosk instead of checking in at the gate." Well, at the time, he was widely criticized for blaming machines for unemployment. I don't think that's exactly what he said, but he did see machines as a problem, or rather structural issue, that had to be dealt with. Well, Henry Hazlitt's book, Economics in One Lesson, addresses this issue. Here, Amanda Billyrock illustrates Chapter 7, titled The Curse of Machinery.
Economics in One Lesson, yo. Written by Sir Henry Hazlitt, retold by Lady Amanda Billyrock. Chapter 7. Have you ever heard that machines create unemployment? An example people might give you are those new machines at grocery stores where you can ring yourself up. People say, well, a cashier lost his job because of this machine, and that has caused unemployment. At first listen, this might seem like a valid argument, but like so many things, we just have to think about it a little more to reach the truth. See, that grocery store machine had to be manufactured somewhere, right? Somewhere like Bob's cost-cutting machines. And the more machines they sell, the more people they have to hire. See, when new technology makes some industries more efficient, the jobs from the old technology move to the industry that's producing the new technology. Sounds like a pretty fetching deal, doesn't it? But wait, there's more. More? Yes, more. Because when technology makes production more efficient, profits go up. And our grocery store owner is likely to do one or more of the following things with her new profits: expand her operations, lower her prices, or spend her money elsewhere. If she expands her grocery store operations, she's going to have to hire more people, which means more jobs. If she lowers her prices, that means that all her customers will now have more money in their pocket on their way home from the grocery store, which means that they all have higher real wages. Or if she chooses to give herself a raise and spend the profit elsewhere, that creates jobs in every other place where she's spending money. Everybody wins. You're a winner. You're a winner. No, you're a winner. And it gets even better. When we have technology that makes our lives easier and easier by eliminating more of the drudgery that used to weigh us down and take up our time, we have more time and resources to do the things that we really want to do, like write music or paint pictures or hula hoop or do medical research or play with our kids or, hey, develop even more and cooler machines. Truth. Better technology equals a better life. Stay tuned for Chapter 8.
Well, machines and computers generally increase productivity. Not always, though, as humans aren't perfect. But it's important for us to remember that the savings from higher productivity don't go only to the owners of the businesses who now have lower costs of doing business. Lower costs don't always mean higher profits, or at least not for long, because those lower costs lead to lower prices as business compete with each other to appeal to consumers. And remember also that increased productivity means that people have to work less to buy more. That helps everyone, not only rich people. In fact, it helps low-income people even more, as this has opened up the possibility of benefiting from all sorts of goods and services that in the past were affordable by only the wealthy. Think of cell phones, now smartphones, air conditioning, high-definition TV, things like that. But still not everyone agrees. Hazlitt tells us that Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, in a syndicated newspaper column in 1945, wrote, "We have reached a point today where labor-saving devices are good only when they do not throw the worker out of his job." And we still hear sentiment like this today. But if we believe this, Hazlitt tells us, not only should we have to regard all further technical progress as a calamity, we should have to regard all past technical progress with equal horror. Remember, there are three things a business owner might do after installing machinery or equipment, Hazlitt tells us. He says, 1, he could use the extra profits to expand his operations by buying more machines to make more overcoats or whatever it may be. Or he will invest the extra profits in some other industry. Or 3, he might spend the extra profits on increasing his own consumption. Whichever of these three courses he takes, he will increase employment. And also remember that when machines are adopted by one business, others have to adapt or face going out of business. This competition reduces prices, and demand for the product will likely rise as the price falls, or people can buy and still have money left over for other things. It's also here that Hazlitt warns of thinking of economic progress in terms of the jobs created. Yet that's what politicians do, because jobs are very easy to see. Hazlitt tells us that the real result of the machinery is to increase production, to raise the standard of living, to increase economic welfare. It's no trick to employ everybody, even or especially in the most primitive economy. Full employment, and very full employment, meaning long, weary, back-breaking employment, that's characteristic of precisely the nations that are most retarded industrially. And a problem in thinking about machines and computers is that often we look at only one group, the people who lose their jobs, and not looking at everyone. And we also tend to look at only the immediate effects and not the long-term effects. But, and Hazlitt does write about this, People do lose jobs for no fault of their own when machines and technology are introduced. And that raises a few questions, such as, should we let these workers make their own adjustments, or should we give them separation pay or unemployment compensation? Should we put them on welfare or train them at government expense for a new job? Well, Hazlitt leaves these questions unanswered for now. But the central lesson, Hazlitt reminds us, is that we should try to see all the consequences of any economic policy or development, the immediate effects on special groups, as well as the long-run effects on all groups. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, speaking of jobs, how is Wichita doing in this area? It's an important question, and Wichita has a number of agencies that are charged with planning and managing our local economy. These agencies are in addition to our elected officials and bureaucrats. So let's take a look at how Wichita has fared.
Hi, I'm Bob Weeks. I'd like to talk about Wichita job growth compared to the nation and compared to our Visioneering peers. Visioneering is an effort to boost the Wichita area economy. It's one of many planning agencies that we have in our area. One of the Visioneering benchmarks is exceed the highest of the annual percentage job growth rate of the United States, Omaha, Tulsa, Kansas City, and Oklahoma City. These are our peer metropolitan areas, according to Visioneering. In a recent presentation, Visioneering presented this chart, but it's difficult to see trends on this presentation. So I've gathered data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and created an interactive visualization using Tableau. And you can use this visualization yourself at my website, The Voice for Liberty, at wichitaliberty.org. I'm showing the growth in employment for Wichita, the United States, and our Visioneering peer cities. This data starts in 1990 and is current through 2012. Also, I've indexed the data, meaning that all regions start at the same relative position so that we can see the relative changes. Here's the data for all jobs, and let me highlight Wichita and the nation as a whole so that they stand out. You can see that Wichita is in the blue, and you can also see that Wichita is in last place. Now, let's look at government employment only. And again, I'll highlight the United States and Wichita. And there is Wichita in the blue at the very top. So Wichita has done well in creating government jobs. Now let's look at private sector employment. This is what's really important because it's the private sector that pays for the public sector. And when I highlight Wichita and the nation as a whole, Wichita again in blue, we can see that Wichita is in last place. And as time goes on, the gap between the growth in private sector employment in Wichita and the rest of the nation and our Visioneering peers is getting larger. Now, there may be those who take comfort that when looking at government jobs, and including government jobs, Wichita does better. But as growth in the government sector outpaces growth in the private sector, Wichita becomes less prosperous than if we were creating more private sector jobs. Now, Mayor Brewer, the City Council, and most everyone seems pleased with Visioneering and our other planning efforts. But let me ask you, are you satisfied with last place?
So as we can see, Wichita is not doing well, and it hasn't always been that way. If you saw in the video, and perhaps I should have made a point of this, there were times when Wichita's job growth was above that of the nation, but that advantage has slipped away. And it's not like we don't know about this, although it's not talked about very often. But last year, the Wichita Eagle reported on our economic development efforts. A news story listed 4 items that economic development professionals say Wichita needs but doesn't have. And the reporter then wrote, "The missing pieces have been obvious for years, but have not materialized for one reason or another." So I wondered, if these pieces are truly needed, and if they've been obviously missing for years, well, isn't that a startling indictment of the failure of Wichita's economic development regime? Each year, Wichita Mayor Coral Brewer delivers a State of the City address, and usually he talks about job creation. He didn't do that this year, but in 2012 he reported that the city's efforts in economic development had created almost 1,000 jobs. And while that seems like a lot of jobs, that number deserves some context. So, according to estimates from the Kansas Department of Labor, the civilian labor force in Wichita is about 192,000 people. And that means that the 1,000 jobs the mayor said we created accounted for only about 0.5% of our city's workforce. That's a minuscule number that's dwarfed by the normal ebb and flow of other economic activity. And the mayor did not mention the cost of creating these jobs. These costs have a negative economic impact on those who pay these costs. And this means that economic activity and jobs are lost somewhere else in order to pay for these incentives. You know this because you know to look beyond the immediate effects and to consider the effects on all groups of people. And in that address in 2012, the Wichita mayor said, "We will incentivize new jobs." And in this year's speech, he said, "The time for action is now." And that was in all capitals, so I think he really meant it. But he continued on, "We have reached a point where we must come together as a community, and we must create a plan that defines our priorities and the city we are to become." And he also told the residents of Wichita that if we want to be in the game, we need to play the game, but we have no dedicated funding source for economic development. And he continued saying, "If we're serious about finding new jobs for our people," and I am, he said, "we must change this scenario as soon as possible. Where will these incentive dollars come from?" So the mayor has called for a dedicated revenue source for economic development, and others have been asking for this too. But did the mayor outline a plan, such as a specific tax, to raise this money? No, he didn't. And it's been about 8 months since he delivered that speech, and as far as I know, there is no plan forthcoming. Now, if we believe that a revenue source for economic development is necessary, why hasn't the mayor proposed a specific plan? He's been in office 6 years. And if, as the Eagle article reported, it's obvious what Wichita needs for economic development, and if everybody has known about this for years, why are we apparently not moving forward to correct these problems? Well, under the leadership of Coral Brewer and several other long-serving politicians and bureaucrats, Wichita has fallen behind. And people are hurt by this when they can't find jobs or can't find fulfilling jobs. The leadership in Wichita has done things like issuing no-bid, overpriced contracts to friends and campaign contributors. We shoveled millions of dollars to a business, and then we see the mayor having a business relationship with that business. In many cities and states, things like this are against the law, but not in Wichita. Instead, we call this economic development. The problem, however, is that Wichita is falling behind. We don't seem to have leaders who are willing to consider anything except more of the same. And instead of increasing economic freedom in Wichita, our leaders want more government planning, more taxing, and more spending. That has not worked very well for Wichita. That is what is hurting Wichita and its people. Well, thanks for watching this episode of Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks.